Mega Man X2 is of course the sequel to X1, and just like Mega Man 2 before it, it's a great sequel. A sequel is meant to take the original game and refine it, figure out what issues the original game had and get rid of them. Or if the original game is just that good, you add on to the original in a substantial and fun way. And I'm glad to say X2 does just that. Before we get started, this is the 16th video in my Mega Man retrospective, and the second video in my Mega Man X retrospective. If you haven't seen the X1 video, I'd recommend watching it before this one, since I'm going to be comparing the two games a good bit. You can also watch some of the classic videos, but that's not required. It's up to you. Our story starts 6 months after the events of X1. Sigma's Maverick Rebellion has been quelled, but there are still a few Maverick bases scattered around. However, X and his team have been taking them down, and we're left with the final one, a factory where Mavericks are being built. The intro series starts with X charging on his bike as he crashes into a robot, and the game begins. Now, there are very few differences between X1's gameplay and X2's gameplay. X can still jump, shoot, charge, all that. However, there is one singular change that automatically makes the game better than X1. The dash is part of X's moveset by default. If you remember from last time, X gained the ability to dash by obtaining the first armor's foot parts. I assume he just modded his base self to have that ability, but regardless, the game is much faster paced because of this. I didn't mention this in the last video, but on repeat playthroughs of X1, the intro stage and Joe Penguin stage were about 10% more excruciating than the rest of the game because you're moving at what was basically a snail's pace. And it's why I consider people to have played X1 while leaving Joe Penguin stage for last to be some of the most patient people on the planet. While we're on the subject of the dash, am I the only person that hates the command dash? If you don't know, instead of hitting the right bumper to dash, you can instead quickly double tap the D-pad left or right to dash. I know this sounds like the most minor of nitpicks, and yeah, it sorta is, but whenever I accidentally do it, it's so irritating. Thank Primus that the ZX games let you turn it off. Beyond X's controls, the intro stage itself is pretty good. Just like X1, it does everything it needs to. You're taught the basics: walking, jumping, shooting, lining your shots up with the enemies, and kicking up walls to climb them. The boss of the stage is a giant mechanoid, and it's pretty easy to take down. After that, we get a cutscene where we see 3 guys in shadow talking about X and their evil plan. These guys are the X-Hunters: Serges, Agile, and Violin. After Sigma's defeat, these 3 took control of the remaining Mavericks and began to resurrect Sigma. They also recovered Zero's parts and are planning to upgrade him and revive him as a Maverick. To help in their plans, they began mass production of Mavericks, but we just took that down. After that, we got our password and... I actually never mentioned this before. Okay, so in Mega Man 2 through 7 and X1 through X3, instead of there being an actual save feature, you instead have passwords, and you write them down once you beat a stage and then input them to load your game. To my knowledge, games were saved using battery backups back in the day, and I'm sure those weren't cheap, so this was an adequate solution. For the SNES games, again, they were saved on a battery, and passwords were another way to save. But by this point, I think Capcom should have just implemented an actual save feature. It wasn't common for NES games to do it, but it was for SNES and Mega Drive games, and it just feels like Capcom was lagging behind. Besides that, we get thrust into the stage select screen, and I really like how the devs streamlined this. In X1, you could see a preview of the stage itself, you could see where the stage took place on a map, and you could see a little bit of info on the Maverick you're about to fight. This requires you to switch between 3 different screens though. In X2, it's all on one screen. The Maverick mugshots on the top and bottom, you see the map in the middle, and you see a preview of the stage name, and a little bit of info on the Maverick overlaid on top of the map. I absolutely love this. It was not something that needed fixing, or something that needed to be changed period, but they did it anyway. We select a stage, and I think the X2 stages have some pretty great theming and set pieces. X1 stages did as well, of course, but I feel it more in this game. Take Flame Stag's level for instance. It takes place near a bunch of volcanoes, so naturally, don't fall unless you want to melt. Then you head inside a volcano and it begins to erupt, so you gotta move quickly and climb up the volcano unless you wanna die. That alone is cool. It gets better though, because inside of the volcano is a heart tank, but a bar weighing blocks it off, so you have to quickly destroy it if you want to get the heart tank. Or, die trying. And then you leave and you have some platforms to jump on, but they quickly fall into the lava. Then you go back into another volcano, and there's some bits of smoke coming out. This is fine until a Morgan appears and lights them aflame. So you gotta wait it out, or just kill the Morgan before it gets a chance to do that. Then you have the boss. There are plenty of other stages that have cool set pieces and gimmicks like this. Take Magna Centipede stage, Central Computer. You start with a bunch of searchlights all around, and you gotta quickly weave your way through them without getting caught. If you do get caught, then bleakers fall from the ceiling, and you have to deal with them shooting at you. Naturally, you don't want to get caught, but there's an extra prize if you don't. You have to grab onto one of the bleakers and wall kick them for the heart tank, but if you get caught, then the bleaker will fall down and you can't get it. Then the installers appear and try to crush you. Sometimes you can quickly get past them, but if you just get stuck behind them, then a purplish variant will fall down, and that one can be destroyed. There's also this segment in the final bit of the stage where you have to contend with these blocks falling down, but I usually just rush past it to get to the X-Hunter room. Overdrive Ostrich's stage, Desert Base, is special though, since you can hitch a ride chaser at the beginning of the level, and you can ride it throughout the level, and you can even use it to get the heart tank without dying. However, there's this bridge that you have to bring down while also being on the ride chaser, and I'm not good enough to do that, so that just doesn't happen. And since I mentioned the heart tanks a few times, why not talk about the upgrades and collectibles? The 8 heart tanks and 4 sub-tanks have returned from the last game, and they function the same. However, I really like their placement in this game. The heart tanks are always placed somewhere fantastic. I've already mentioned them in Volcanic Zone and Central Computer, but there are a few other ones. Back to Desert Base, you can get the heart tank with the ride chaser, but I usually get it by air dashing and then using a charged speed burner, thus enabling me to get the heart tank without touching the spikes. Only to immediately touch them and die right after, but who cares, I got the heart tank. Or in Crystal Snail stage, Energen Crystal. This one is pretty tough to get, as there's just a massive gap you can't cross normally. There are 2 ways to get it, both of which require the ride armor. You could just use a well-timed jump to get across, but I usually dash jump off and then use strike change to latch onto the wall and get the heart tank that way. I think my favorite would be in Wheel Gator stage, Dinosaur Tank. The heart tank is above this wall of spikes, and normally you need to use either the air dash or a charged speed burner. But if you can get the Tiernos to shoot at you and you get hit by the shots, you can use the iframes to climb up the wall of spikes without dying and get the heart tank that way. The worst heart tank placement is easily in Wire Sponge's stage, Weather Control. The stage itself is fine, but the heart tank... I'm sorry, but who the hell would think to look there? The wall is solid except for that tiny part the heart tank is in, and it's not like there's any clue the heart tank is there, you just have to run at the solid wall like a doofus. This game also has 4 armor pieces to collect, and I'd say they're a lot better than the armor pieces in X1. They're hidden just as well as the heart tanks, and what they give you is pretty freaking great. The first one I usually get is the arm parts. You're supposed to get it with an air dash, but I instead just use strike chain. With the arm parts you get a 3rd charge shot, just like the first armor arm parts. This is special though since you get 2 charge shots, so double damage. You also don't even need to time them since they go through shields and iframes, so it's absolutely overpowered. Wheel Gator is weak to strike chain, but there's no point because the arm parts deal so much damage. Next are the foot parts in Desert Base. You need Spin Wheel to destroy the blocks in front of it, and with the foot parts you gain the ability to dash in the air horizontally. This isn't as big of a game changer as the first armor foot parts, but they don't have to be. These are plenty useful in their own right, as your aerial mobility is significantly increased, especially when you add Speed Burner into the mix. It's basically just a lot easier to traverse ceilings and walls, and I love it. You find the head parts in the Energen Crystal, and they're about as useless as the next one. They're definitely better, as you can see some secret item locations, but I really do not care about that. It'd be one thing if there was a pop-up when you were near an item location so you'd remember to pull up the locator and find it, kinda like Pallet in X8, but you just have to randomly use it throughout the stage and hope you find something. Finally, there are the body parts in the robot junkyard. You need Spin Wheel to break the blocks beneath you, and with the body parts you lessen the damage you take by 50%, which is always nice. They added a bonus this time around though. as the body parts will absorb some of the damage you take and repurpose it into the Giga Crash, a massive screen-wiping blast. This sounds great, until you use it against a boss and they get a paper cut. The Giga Crash sounds absolutely incredible and it could be great in a future game, it just needs to deal more damage. There is one more thing hidden in the stages, the X Hunters. At the beginning of the game, they were planning to just let their subordinates take care of X, but after 2 stages, they realized they need to take matters into their own hands. So they send a transmission to Maverick Hunter HQ and challenge X themselves, and tell X that if they're defeated, each will drop a different part of Zero. Then all the X Hunters are hidden in the stage, and you have to find them. In the stages, they're usually hidden away in a room off the beaten path, like this upper area of Desert Base, or all the way at the end in Central Computer. Getting to the boss isn't that tricky, but the real challenge comes from the fights themselves. Personally, I really like them. You can fight these 3 in any order, but the first one I fought was Agile. His fight was kinda easy as you can camp up at the top, he swings his sword and launches a massive projectile at you, and you just jump down and hit him. Or when he attacks on the ground, dash underneath. The main thing to watch out for is when he dashes across the ground. There isn't much of a telegraph for that, and he moves at a rapid pace, so there isn't much time to dodge. Once you defeat him, he just dips. None of the X-Hunters die once you defeat them, they just retreat to the castle stages. The next X-Hunter I fought was Serges. He's the most interesting plot-wise, but as for his fight, it's fine. He drops bombs from his little hovercraft, and once you hit him, he jumps into the air, does a full front flip, and sends out a bunch of shots you have to dodge. I am confused about how his shield works though. Once you hit him, a tiny shield will pop up where he's taking damage, and I don't know whether my second charge shot hits him or not. I know it goes through shield, but sometimes it feels like I'm not doing any damage regardless. Finally, there's Violin. His fight is probably the easiest as he just swings a massive spiked ball around the arena. It does a good bit of damage, and if you aren't dodging, you'll probably take a lot of unnecessary damage, but that's about it. One interesting thing to mention about the X-Hunters is that they can permanently disappear from the Maverick stages. This accidentally happened to me in my first playthrough. Violin was in the deep sea base, and to access the X-Hunter arena in that stage, you need to destroy the submarine that you follow throughout the whole stage. I had no clue how to destroy it, and I only took chunks off, so when the end of the stage came, I just skipped Violin and took on Bubble Crab. Then Violin never appeared again. So if you go to a stage that an X-Hunter is in and you don't defeat them and just skip them, they will leave and you will not be able to fight them again until the castle stages. This might be fine on its own, but you then remember that each X-Hunter drops a part of Zero. So if you don't defeat all of them, you don't have all of Zero's parts, and Zero is brought back as a Maverick in the last castle stage. Beyond that, this game also has some cool special weapons. I didn't get much use out of most of them, but I still do like them. Crystal Hunter is a cool one as you hit an enemy and they become a platform for you to stand on. It's especially cool in the third X-Hunter stage, as you can use it to look a lot cooler than the intended way to get through this segment. Spin Wheel is useful for cutting through parts of the level that hold secrets, like the foot parts and the body parts. Silk Shot is usually worthless, but there are a few secret rooms where you can use it to grab health pickups or special weapon pickups, so that's pretty darn cool. Strike Chain can be used to cling onto walls and kick up them, so that's useful for some collectibles. My favorite is Speed Burner though. First, I just think the red looks very good on X. I don't know what it is, the red is just very appealing. But secondly, the regular shot doesn't do much, but the charge shot is absolutely rad. It's basically just a second air dash and it gives you a lot more control over the air. It just feels very cool to air dash, use a charged Speed Burner, and extend your mid-air time while also probably grabbing a pickup. Maybe I'm not making this weapon sound as cool as I think it is, or maybe I'm just easily amused, but I don't care, Speed Burner is one of my favorite Mega Man weapons. Now then, are the bosses any better than X1? Well, kinda? Not really. In X1, pretty much every boss was pretty great if you fought them without their weakness, but bringing in the weakness gave mixed results. With some bosses like Spark Mandrill and Boomer Kuwanger, the boss just got stuck in a loop and the fight became trivially easy. With some bosses like Armor Armadillo and Launch Octopus, it's still a regular old fight except I'm dealing a bit more damage, which I think every boss should strive towards. In X2, we're in the same boat. Every boss is great without their weakness, but with their weakness, it just depends. With someone like Flame Stag, using his weakness, Bubble Splash, you just keep the guy in a pattern until he dies. Meanwhile, with someone like Bubble Crab, it's still an actual fight where you have to pay attention, dodge, and wait for an opening. just dealing a bit more damage. With someone like Wheel Gator, yeah, you can use his weakness against him, Strike Chain, but there's no point in doing that since a fully charged shot from the arm parts deals more damage. Magna Centipede is interesting, as his gimmick is that he grabs you and takes a move away, like dashing, jumping, or charging. It's pretty cool and I like it on paper. When it comes to actually fighting the guy though, I just hit him with his weakness, Silk Shot, so he can't do that anymore, and it's fine because the rest of the fight is still pretty good. I just got rid of the annoying part. Gets even more interesting though, because after one hit from Silk Shot, Magna Centipede takes a paper cut of damage from that, so you're better off firing charge shots. So overall, I do like these bosses, but they are no improvement over X1. Before we get to the castle stages, there are two more things I want to mention. First, the soundtrack. X1 soundtrack was incredible and some of the best on the system. There are better Mega Man OSTs out there, but X1 was sitting at the top of the pile. I am glad to say X2 is the exact same. I don't think it's better than X1, but it's still fantastic in its own right. Here are some of my favorites. Finally, I want to mention how I played this game. Just like X1, I played the game on an emulator because integer scaling. But there is one more thing I want to mention. For X1, X2, and X3, there's a retranslation patch you can download from romhacking.net, and the X2 one is made by 131335 and Naldrag, and I installed it. Basically, in the English localization, they removed all the cool references the Japanese version had. For example, Sergei mentions how he was defeated by another one of Light's robots, which is absolutely not something he should know. And in the English version, nobody calls X, X. They just call him Mega Man, which is wrong on 2 levels. First, no one knows X's full name besides Light, Kane, and maybe Wily. Everyone just calls him X. Second, X is not Mega Man. You do not call him Mega Man. You can call him Mega Man X, but not Mega Man. But with this retranslation patch, all of this is fixed, and that's great. Finally, it's time for the castle stages. Just like X1, I think these stages are pretty good. The first stage has a cool part where they bring back the slide aim for the intro stage, and it's bringing walls together again to crush you, but you have much more to climb up, so you gotta be quick about it. Kicking up walls has always been fun in these games, so it's great to see it used like this. The stage ends with the boss fight against Neo Violin, and honestly, I'm mixed on this. On the one hand, I absolutely hated fighting him my first time around because the giant spike ball moves around so quickly and it hits like a tank, so it's infuriating when you do get hit. On the other hand, it is pretty fun to try and dodge the ball and get hits in. Once that's done, Violin is dead, and you move on to X-Hunter Stage 2. X-Hunter Stage 2 spends a good bit underwater as you use the things to stay above the spikes. Yeah, I looked at the wiki and these jet platforms don't have a name, but you gotta stick to them. Then you gotta ride up while fire is spat at you. You're supposed to alternate between which side of the platform you're clinging onto, but you can also just stand on top of the platform and be just fine. After that, you need to use Crystal Hunter to freeze these bats across the spikes, and you reach the Sergei's tank. This is a pretty fun fight, as you first start with needing to destroy all 4 cannons on the front while they also fire at you. You're also standing above a bed of spikes while standing on floating platforms that are moving up and down, so you have a good amount of variables to keep into account. Then, once that's done, you need to take down Sergeis himself. I heard that using the Giga Crash would help here, and it did not. Again, he only took like a paper cutter damage. It's kinda hard to hit the guy since you can only hit the part of him that's not covered by a seat. It's best to just keep on charging Sonic Slicers and it rains down from the sky, so it's a guaranteed hit. Once you defeat him, Sergeis will mention how he's been defeated by Light's robotic memento. This is interesting because only Kane knows that X was made by Light, not even sure X himself knows. It's basically a well-known fact by this point that Sergeis, and Isaac in X6, is a replate avatar of Dr. Wily's. I have no clue how Wily managed to pull that off, but it explains how Sergeis knows about Light and X's relationship, and also how Zero got upgraded in between X1 and X2. Sergeis upgraded him since he's familiar with Zero circuitry. But Sergei dies and we move on to the final X-Hunter stage. X-Hunter Stage 3 is the longest of the three, and it's my favorite. There's this section in the beginning where you're meant to use this platform that moves in a bunch of different directions, but I don't feel like doing that. Instead, look at this. Dude, I'm just so good at video games. After that, you use Crystal Hunter on these bats to access that ladder up top, and at least at this section where you have to freeze a bat, air dash across, then charge a speed burner to air dash across a bed of spikes twice, and then cling onto the wall to reach another light capsule. This is some of the most fun I've had in a Mega Man game, simply because air dashing around and dodging insta-kill spikes is some of the most fun you can have in a Mega Man game. After that, you cling to the wall and reach another armor capsule, where X learns the Shoryuken, another Street Fighter move. This one is different, as instead of the Shoryuken insta-killing whatever it touches, as the Hadouken did, it instead has a chance to insta-kill something if you time it right. As a trade-off, you could do it whenever instead of needing to be at full health. And that's the last thing in the stage before the boss, and you fight the Agile Flyer. This fight is the easiest and probably my favorite. Agile will stay at the top of the arena, so you need to wall kick up there and hit him. Every minute or so though, he'll create a floor of spikes that you need to dodge, and if you're in the process of making your way up to Agile, you'll get hit and need to head back to the floor. Overall, I think it's a pretty fun fight, but also the easiest since dodging the spikes isn't hard, and there's a gap where you can safely climb up and hit him. And after you defeat Agile, it's time for the final stage. The game doesn't really have a fourth capsule stage. Instead, you go back to Central Computer, which I think is pretty cool, especially since I don't think the other games of the franchise do this. This stage is pretty much the same as when you first got here, but once you reach the mini-boss room, Sigma shows up. And if you didn't defeat the X-Hunters in the Maverick stages, Zero will show up, and you have a boss fight against him. Honestly, I really like this. It's a good punishment for not defeating the X-Hunters, as Zero is pretty much the only guy on your side in the last game. He saved you from Vile, and he even sacrificed himself for you, but he's now turned against you and you gotta fight him. It's pretty cool story-wise, but the fight itself is also really cool. Zero is probably the hardest fight in the game, and that makes perfect sense lore-wise. He has a standard 3-hit combo where he shoots with his buster twice and then swings with the Z-Saber. Then, if you get far enough away, he'll dash across the arena, hit the ground, and then the debris will fall back down. It's very fast-paced, he hits very hard, you need to be on your toes the entire time. It's great. That's not all though, as Zero got a brand new theme for this game. Honestly, I don't know which one I like more, his X1 theme? Or his X2 theme. However, that's not the only reason I bring this up. I bring this up because in my first playthrough, I was absolutely caught off guard when this started playing, and it's because Marvel vs. Capcom 3 has an incredible remix of this theme that's just ingrained into my memory. However, if you defeated all the X-Hunters before the capsule stages, then you won't fight Zero, and instead he'll come and destroy the black copy that Sigma has, and... nice, didn't know Zero was a Metal Gear fan. Anyway, after fighting Zero, he'll return to your side, and the game continues as normal. Zero will take out the Central Computer while X heads down to take care of Sigma. The final boss commences as Sigma has taken the new form of Neo Sigma. So he's basically just Wolverine. He has claws now and he slashes you with them. He'll also sometimes teleport in and send you flying across the arena, so that's nice. He has balls of electricity he sends out and even a massive wall you have to dodge. After you defeat him, you have a big Sigma head to deal with, as this is the Sigma virus. Lore-wise, it's basically just the Maverick virus, but it takes the form of Sigma's head. His weak point is his eyes, and this dude has a lot of health. He doesn't even have a health bar, but you can instead tell his HP as the head itself will change color. He also spawns into some regular enemies from the other stages, which is nice as you can refill your health and subtanks with them. But during the fight, Zero finishes destroying the computer and the Sigma virus goes with it. Sigma states that it doesn't matter if X wins this time, as he'll come back to win their next fight. He also states his confusion as to why Zero betrayed him, telling us that Zero was the last of the... Y-Num. I mean, I don't know what this is, but I assume that's important. Regardless, Sigma is defeated, and X and Zero retreat. The two of them stand on the cliffside, as X wonders why he has the power that he does, and he wonders if Lightstream of a utopia where humans and robots coexist will ever be a reality. But for now, he should rest. And that ends Mega Man X2. Mega Man X2 is a great game. It does everything a good sequel should do. It took everything that worked in X1 and just did that again, while also changing and adding what it needed to in order to remain fresh. X1's bad parts have almost all been removed, and it leads to X2 being better than X1 in nearly every way. And in the ways that it isn't better, it's equal to the original. X1 was a game where the series found its voice, and X2 is the game where it was confident in that voice. And this leaves me with some high hopes for X3. But until then, I'll see you in the next video.